allow me to introduce our guest tonight with few words that won't do him any justice. Bill is originally from New York City, more specifically a Harlem boy. He grew up in several African countries and was educated in both Switzerland and the United States. He now commutes between Geneva, Rotterdam, and Dubai. During his corporate career, he has spent time with companies like The Gap, Chrysler, General Motors. Bill has also been either a professor or adjunct professor at a lot of top-tier schools in Europe and the US, most notably IE Business School, of course, and another very small Swiss school. These are his words, which I will not name. He has also done numerous in-company presentations and holds numerous teaching awards. Bill has spent the last decade working with startups in various parts of the world, most recently in the social entrepreneurship space with the Hult Prize, among others. Bill has been a coach and consultant to several multinationals and global financial institutions like Nestle, HSBC, Seco Epson, and numerous others. He has also created a class and a published book titled Massaging the Mind that dives into the behavioral sciences of consumers. I cannot also forget to mention that he is a part-time DJ.
I knew you were going to do it. I knew this was coming.
Even while teaching us at the MBA, and once a radio celebrity with his Dr. Bill show, and the list goes on. Welcome, Bill, to virtual Saudi Arabia, and it is a pleasure to have you on board. The structure, just a second, if you allow me, the structure of this session today will be 40 minutes talk, 40 to 45, and a maximum of 20 minutes Q&A. I'll be taking questions from your posts in chat, if you don't mind, if you can post them on chat in Zoom. And I'll stop here. So the mic is yours, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Faisal. First of all, it's good to see you. And second of all, it's an honor to be able to join you folks this evening. I'm coming to you from Geneva in Switzerland, where winter is just beginning to set in. It's a golden opportunity to be able to share these few minutes with you, and particularly since Faisal was kind enough to pretty much give me a free rein on what I wanted to talk about. We're all living and have been living for the last year or so in, I think, what one can safely call unprecedented circumstances. And this in a period where kind of, at least in the business world, the word disruption was already fairly commonplace. I don't think that anybody was expecting kind of the black swan, for those of you who are familiar with the book and the author, the type of black swan event that has suddenly befallen us. We've seen the world's economies basically to some extent brought to their knees in less than a year on the negative side. On the positive side, we've seen, for the most part, perhaps with one country excluded, a global effort to try and cooperate to get this pandemic under control, which has resulted in, as I think everybody knows, the very hopeful scenario of several vaccines being delivered to us within a relatively short period of time. So, you know, as Faisal and I were saying before the session opened, there does seem to be light at the end of the tunnel, and I am desperately hoping that it is sunshine and not an oncoming train. I think the bet on the sunshine is fairly positive. I'm going to get cranking if there's some very specific topics that I'd like to bounce off you folks, and it's going to be a little bit one way in the sense that you will not be able to respond by mic, but what I would ask you to do is, if you have any comments or questions, please tap them out or type them out in the chat, and Faisal has said he'd be kind enough to relay those to me. So hopefully I can try and work some of your questions or comments that are related to my comments, and we try and keep this a two-way conversation, at least as much as the technology will permit. Where to start? Oh boy, I've got a lot of different comments. Well, let's start at the beginning. I think one of the things that has happened over the last year is that we've all been given a very clear vision of what is possible. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, what I mean by that is that we've seen perhaps a decade of progress in terms of the impact of digitalization on our societies as a result of the lockdown, as a result of the pandemic. Okay? We have seen major organizations in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere basically telling their employees, hey, you know something? This is permanent. Just stay home, okay? Or at least stay home 3 days out of the week, right? We don't need you to come into the office. And I don't think that this is being done out of any sense of beneficence for the employees, but I think rather that, you know, from a straight business standpoint, people have recognized that there are some cost savings and some efficiencies which can be gained as a result of this. And this is perhaps one of the, if you will, the bells that's been going off in my head as we've tried to find our way through this, is the continued search for efficiencies. We have always looked for efficiencies in business. There's no question about that. But I think that what the pandemic did is force us in many cases to strip things down to bare minimum, as much we did perhaps in 2008 to a lesser extent for those of you who might have been around and active, you know, a decade ago. And I think we've suddenly realized, hey, it is possible for a university to go completely online. It is possible for MIT to go completely online, or IE to go 80, 90% online and still have results, okay? So the whole thinking that has been forced upon us, it could be argued, is something that we've been talking about for decades. I mean, as a business school professor, we've talked about distance learning and the impact of e-learning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but we never really kind of embraced it, okay? The pandemic has forced us to embrace it and all that results from that. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. But the bottom line is we've suddenly woken up. I think a lot of people have suddenly woken up and said, hey, wait a minute. There is another possible reality out there. And maybe I should try and take advantage of that, right? Because, you know, if you're a fan of Peter Drucker, the old management theorist like I am, you know, opportunity comes with disruption. Opportunity comes from chaos, right? That's when you have opportunities to develop and sell new value, right? And this is really what I'm going to be talking about here. So it's not at all gloom and doom, quite the contrary. I'm extremely positive about what's been happening around me, okay? So I think a lot of us have gotten a very clear vision of what we can do. Some of the companies that I'm working with have put their, you know, what they refer to often as digital transformation projects into overdrive. Okay, this is resulting in some cases in layoffs, massive layoffs in some cases, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the efficiencies that have been, how should I say, put into turbo mode, right, as a result of the pandemic. Okay, so that's kind of one quick issue I'll throw out there and something to think about, because obviously therein lies opportunity. And as I go a little bit further, I'll try and get perhaps a little more specific about where I see some of the perhaps the potential opportunities. Another thing that I've seen change drastically is consumer behavior. Over the last year, I've been fortunate to teach in Mexico, in Dubai, in the United States, some of it online, some of it here in Europe, some of it online, some of it in person. And what has been very, very clear, particularly when I talk to my friends at Ericsson and those of the telecom operators, is to see the traffic go through the roof as people's shopping behavior moves online, okay? In some cases, we're now seeing up to 20 to 30% of total retail commerce being done online. Just a few years ago, a couple of years ago, that was 8 to 12%. Okay, so it's very clear that the pandemic, as I said earlier, has put a turbo mode into what we expected already, some would say, okay? It's just perhaps happened a lot earlier than we expected. I think one of the things that I have found most interesting, I'm a marketing guy, as Faisal mentioned, and consumer behavior is my passion, is when watching some older consumers, baby boomers, who were still, in many cases, particularly in Mexico, for example, recalcitrant to buy clothing over the web because it wasn't going to fit and whatever. And now to listen to them as a result of the pandemic saying, I don't know why I didn't do this before. I can get it for free and send it back for free. So I see a number of people embracing, in terms of the consumers, embracing what for many of them still seems to be a new form of business, right? And the companies that position themselves to be able to take advantage of that are doing extremely well. Not everyone has been hard hit by the pandemic. Some have, but not everybody. Some others have done extremely well as a result of the pandemic. Okay, so consumer behavior is changing. Depending on where you are in the world, that change is a little bit different, but it's very clear that there are changes pretty much everywhere. Okay, India, China, United States, Europe. I haven't been to Saudi, unfortunately, in many a years. So I'll have to leave it to you guys to perhaps project onto what you know from some of the things that I'm saying. Okay. So there's been a major shift in consumer behavior. This has been well documented. I don't want to spend hours and hours perhaps belaboring this, although I'd be more than happy to explore this afterwards if anyone has any questions. A second issue that has been really brought to the fore in many countries is the entire issue of social inequality. Okay, this is another thing that the pandemic has made extremely obvious, which is basically if you have the money, if you're wealthy and you're kind of reasonably comfortable, let's say upper middle class and above, your chances of surviving are significantly greater than they are if you're at the lower end of the social ladder. That's going to be compounded and has already been compounded by layoffs of people, many of whom I don't think will necessarily go back to work. Although we did have a full employment situation before this thing started in the US. I think, however, some of the efficiencies that we've been talking about, which will be, how should one say, reinforced by AI, right? Machine learning and artificial intelligence has kind of propelled us into a reality that we could see coming, but we had not yet embraced. And I think that at the moment, we are in the process of beginning to embrace that reality. That is going to lead to social inequalities. We're already seeing what's happening in the streets in Europe. We're already seeing what's happening in the streets in many countries in Latin America. We've already seen what's happening in places like Lebanon, for example. So this is a flaming issue in a number of different areas. Now, why do I talk about that? I talk about that because this is not a situation that any kind of sane or stable society wants to see ongoing. So therefore, we are going to have to take some measures to overcome this. In certain countries, this is turned into minimum subsistence payments, right? Where, for example, in Finland, you get X amount of dollars every month for free. Here in Switzerland, in Geneva, where I live, the minimum salary was recently raised to $4,000 a month. Okay. That's a nice piece of change. I mean, I'm not sure by Saudi standards, but by US standards, $4,000 a month is.
I found this on the web for in certain countries. It's turned into minimum assistance payments example.
Oh my goodness. Google decided to join into my pitch here. I'm sorry about that. I must have said a trigger word. Just goes to show that they're listening to everything that you say. Okay. But I think that this issue of social inequality is not going to go away. In consumer societies, we require consumers. And in order for there to be consumers need to have income. And this is one of the things that we're seeing now in terms of the subsistence payments and whatever the governments are making to try and keep people, with some money in their pockets so we can keep the economy going. This is not a new issue, okay? This has been around for a while. It's been talked about for a while. In some countries, it is much more pronounced than it is in others. For example, say Latin America, where it's fairly obvious, some countries in Africa where it's fairly obvious, and there are pressures for something to occur, right? Now, again, whenever there is uncertainty or chaos, and we live in a VUCA world, right? I smell opportunity. I can't tell you exactly where the opportunity may lie, but there's clearly going to be opportunity. we're seeing a lot of company restructuring and cost reduction. And I really do want to spend a little bit of time talking about this. You've all seen the highly popular news coming out of the Silicon Valley companies, you know, Twitter and whatever, and Dorsey telling his people, listen, don't bother to come back, just work from home. You can work from home indefinitely. And I think initially my reaction was, okay, I get that, sure. But then last week, my partner who works for a relatively bureaucratic organization here in Geneva was also told that henceforth, work from home, okay? If you want to come into the office, you can come in for 2 days a week, but other than that, work from home. Now, if this spreads, and now that we have a vaccine, it could be argued it's not going to spread, right? We'll go back to normal. Well, I'm not so sure about that because there are some cost advantages to having people stay at home. If you don't have to rent very expensive office buildings, et cetera, I mean, you folks are business people. I don't need to explain the details to you, but there are very potentially some significant cost savings. And when you hear the president of the bank say that, look, you know, 90% of my people are at home and we have experienced no operational difficulties whatsoever, that suggests that going forward, what we see on the horizon is perhaps going to be a little bit different than what we're seeing today. Okay, so this readjustment period of getting back to quote unquote normal, whatever the heck that means these days, I think is also going to be very interesting. If people don't go back, and let's just explore this one a little bit. If people don't go back, that means they're going to be home more often. Okay, if they're home more often, that means we don't have to impose on our children getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning and going to school for 5 hours, and, you know, 8 hours a day. Why? Because the previous industrial revolution model of people's behavior required that the kids be taken care of so mommy and daddy can go to work and make money. If mommy and daddy no longer need to go to work or work can be done at home, then maybe we don't have to send our kids into purgatory. I'm being a little bit kind to my, my teachers. Maybe we don't need to send the kids in purgatory. Maybe we can actually think of a different model of how we educate our children and what the nature of our living experience can be, right? And that implies, if you will, all types of new business opportunities, okay? Now, whether we're going to get there or not, I have a feeling, you know, we've already been inching in that direction, okay? In other words, I think what you're going to hear from me as I go forward is perhaps none of what I'm seeing here to me is new. I've been working from home for the past 10 years. So work from home for me is nothing new. This whole environment for me is extremely familiar. I'm actually smiling at watching my friends as they try and adjust to a different work reality. But it also means a different personal reality. Okay? And that's the one I think maybe folks need to put a little thought into. Okay? Because I think there's going to be a whole lot of opportunities that are going to open up as a result of that. To some extent, and I'm going to get perhaps a little provocative here, you know, it's what I like to refer to as the slow death of the industrial revolution model. You know, post-industrialism is here. No question. Not in all of the world, clearly not. Okay, there's still a lot of factories where people are working out, churning out tens of thousands of goods. But, you know, post-pandemic, you got to ask yourself a question, you know, in a country like China, where there is, you know, kind of one power ruling everything, those jobs are perhaps as much a social necessity as they are an economic necessity. Okay. In other words, could they dump the people and still churn out the products? Yeah. In many cases, the answer is yes. Okay. So, food for thought. I mean, the new reality is only new to the extent that we haven't implemented it yet. It's not that we don't know it. Okay, we've been kind of, you know, and I look at education. You know, we educate people the same way today that Aristotle used to. He used to sit out and people would sit around him and he would lecture to them the same way that we do in a business school in front of a pulpit when you have a theater and 70 students there. Good Lord Almighty. Really? Surely we can do better than this. Okay? So you know, this notion of just stay at home, if it spreads, and I think it will, as some of the cost, you know, the person-to-person requirement, I think that many people complain about, is more of a social necessity, I think, than it is a transactional necessity. Right? I mean, how much of our customer service has already been shifted to different countries where, you know, you call somebody or you send somebody an email, you have no idea where they are because their physical location in this day and age is almost irrelevant. The question is, can they deliver value by solving your problem? Okay. So we are, you know, the pandemic has propelled us full speed into a future that I think a lot of people have already been predicting for some time. Okay. I mentioned the issue of minimum subsistence payments because, you know, there have been tens of thousands of layoffs recently. Okay. We need these people as consumers. Okay. So somehow we have to turn them into consumers. And the traditional way was get them a job, et cetera. Well, what if there are no jobs? Because we actually don't need people to do that because the technology has moved on. You know, I don't need anybody to drive that car for me. I don't need anybody to drive that truck for me. The truck drives itself, right? There's a new branch of Alibaba now that has, you know, delivery carts that negotiate their way through the traffic. You get a key code. It lets you know when it's downstairs. You go in, you punch your code in, it opens up, you take your package and go upstairs. Bye-bye Amazon drivers, right? Which is a significant source of employment for very many people in the United States. I know Bezos, whatever you might think of Bezos, the fact of the matter is Amazon provides employment for a large number of people. Okay. Another one that I'm finding fascinating is, you know, what's going to happen with oil, you guys? You know, it's like, have you seen Tesla stock? I mean, I used to work for General Motors when we were the biggest company in the world. I mean, look at Tesla, right? So the highest valued car company is now an electric car company. Okay. And if the planes stay on the ground for a significant amount longer, and we really don't know where that's going to go. I know everybody says they want to travel, but you know, how many people are rushing to get on a plane at the moment? Or let's see after the vaccine. But the bottom line is it gets back to my first point, my second point, which is that consumer behavior has changed. Will it go back? Possibly. But, you know, given a choice, you know, I mean, you know, Tesla's hot. Electric is hot. Electric is clean, or at least that's how people see it. Okay. So, you know, those of you in the press, you've read about, you know, why perhaps investing in oil stocks is perhaps not the best place to have your your dollar at the moment, or your or whatever your currency, your euro, or whatever your currency might be. And obviously for people who are based in oil producing countries, and I work a lot in Africa, right? Countries like Nigeria, okay, for example, okay. There's a huge impact when so much of the government's budget is dependent upon that. Ouch, ouch. But there again, okay, there will be opportunity, right? Nature abhors a vacuum, right? We all know that, okay? Okay, so that's why you see this little smile on my face. Because yeah, I'm a marketing guy. Okay, the magic word for me is problem. People buy solutions to problems. That's what they pay you for. Whatever the problem might be. The problem might be status or whatever, or it might be just something basic like keeping the lights on in your house. But if you can solve a problem and really generate value, then to some extent, I would argue, it doesn't matter what environment you're in. Okay, I've worked with textile companies who have pivoted from making clothing into making PPE, which is protection garments for folks fighting against COVID. Okay, I came up with a product with, let me see, what did I do with it? We came up with a product a few years ago called a Waka Waka Solar Light, which was used by people who were treating Ebola. This is how they found their way around the camps at night. Okay, so again, there's opportunity out there. You just have to, you know, as one of my professors told me years ago, there's a lot of opportunity out there. You just have to recognize it first to be able to take advantage of it. Okay. Personal space. This is something that we all are very familiar with, right? And depending on what country, you know, those of you who have been to Spain, perhaps with school in Madrid, you know, the Spanish are like, you know, often very touchy-feely, put their arms around you, give you a big hug, big kiss. In France, even the men kiss themselves in the cheek and whatever, it's all good. In other countries, you do that, you're going to lose some teeth. I mean, you go to New York, you kiss a businessman on the cheek, and you're going to see your dentist probably shortly thereafter. Okay, so so the notion of personal space differs very much from country to country. However, I think what has happened is people, particularly with the pandemic, I think many people have begun to see personal space as a luxury. Okay. I think many of my more well-to-do friends have always known this. That's why they have their islands and they have their houses in remote places, because it could be argued that the ultimate luxury is personal luxury. And the pandemic, I think, has brought that to fore for a lot of people. Yes, we miss seeing our families, no question about that. Yes, we miss going to see our friends. But you know what's booming? Is the luxury business where that personal touch. There's a hotel here called Le Bijou in Geneva, which has been written up all over the place. But what they did is everybody that works there gets a COVID test daily. When you check into the hotel, you're tested right away. It's guaranteed to be COVID-free the entire time that you're there. And obviously, the fact that you know that everybody's been tested on a daily basis, so it's not they were tested 3 days ago and then they kissed somebody who might, all right, on a daily basis, you check in and you relax. Okay. I got to be careful about what I say now, but a company, I think I might have a student or two here from the African Leadership University where I teach, a company that has had to shut down 7 safari parks in East Africa simply because the planes stopped flying and the tourists didn't come anymore. And my suggestion to him was, okay, you might not be able to get all 7 going, but how about you take your, you know, the crown jewel and you reposition it for those people who can afford to fly. In other words, people who have their own planes, or people who can afford to get a small group and charter a plane to come. In other words, get away from the $700, $800, you know, a day or 2 days kind of tourist and move up market to someone who can not only appreciate that luxury but can afford it. Is that somewhat elitist? Yeah, I guess so. But if the bottom line is, do you have to lay off 15,000 people because there's no tourists, or can you maybe keep 5,000 of them employed if you kind of revisit your business model? I think, you know, kind of the end decision is not rocket science. Okay. So again, the whole idea of personal space is luxury. That's a huge business opportunity. Okay. Now, how far down market we could push that, that's going to depend on markets and what customers you go after, right? I was taught last century when I did my MBA by my German strategy professor that the upper end of the market was always a nicer place to dance. Okay, your customers are less price sensitive, you're getting better margins. Yeah, you might not be doing the volume, but you're definitely doing the profit. And I learned from him not to chase volume for the sake of volume, but to chase profit. And if volume was part of profit, then so be it, but not the other way around. Okay. Does it sound like this world is going to get a little bit more discriminatory? Yes, it is. And that was why I made the comment about the social pressure and inequality. Okay. How should I put this? I work with a group that owns a venture cap company, actually. And I've known the owner for a while, and one of our conversations now has been around, and he was like, we people of means, and I'm like, I know what he means. Yeah, you rich guys. He's like, it's not looking. I'm like, no, it's not looking good. I said, a large part of the world looks at you like like the Italians looked at the Medici family back in the day. Okay, you have what they think is too much. And the crumbs that are falling off the table are not big enough to feed anything but the smallest mouse. Okay, that's not a scenario that's healthy. Okay, we've seen this before in societies, and which has prompted significant social disruption. Whether it go back as far as the Magna Carta, or look at the French Revolution, or even come forward to the civil rights movements in the United States. You can only push people so far. So this issue of social inequality is going to result in something. Now, whether it results in huge tax increases for those at the upper end of the bracket or some other solution, I don't know. I'm not here to talk about politics or whatever. Right? That's a whole nother, that's not my turf. But where I see a problem, problems demand solutions, and in many cases, if the problem is severe enough, people will pay for that solution. Okay? And this is why I wanted to kind of highlight that. We've also faced a rather ugly dilemma. Okay, and I remember reading an article in the New York Times at the very beginning of the pandemic saying that we were going to have to make a trade-off between profit and well-being. In other words, in order to keep the economy going, people were going to have to die. And I remember reading that and going, oof, that's really hard-nosed, but the fundamental analysis was right on target. Okay. And this trade-off between well-being and profit goes beyond just the pandemic. Okay. I don't want to get up on a pedestal here. I'm not, that's not my role. I'm not here to judge folks. But what I do is I see an issue there. I see an issue, and it's related to some of the things that I referred to earlier. In other words, there are some fundamental social changes going on, and I think which are going to have to be dealt with perhaps a little more forthrightly than we have done so far. And that is one positive for me aspect of the pandemic, which is it forced us into turbo mode. Okay. It forced us to get off of our lazy assets and to look at, how can I become more efficient? What is my world going to look like going forward? Does it make sense to keep doing what I've been doing? In other words, it kind of forced a refresher process on all of us, what we're still going through. Okay. Boy, this clock is ticking really fast. So let me switch gears here a little bit. Okay, and oh yeah, Face.
I have 5 minutes, if you don't mind, Bill.
Yep, got you. Okay. 5 minutes, very quick. So where do I see some opportunities in all of this, right? Because it's nice for me to observe things, but the question is, well, thank you for the observations, Bill, but now what the heck do I do about it, right? One, health and well-being. Okay, good businesses going forward. All you have to do is look at the stock price of Peloton and a few others, right? One of the things I've seen from the consumer behavior, people have been spending ridiculous amounts of money on their health. Everything from physical exercise to apps like Noom and others who have just exploded. Okay, still a lot of opportunity there, I believe, as a result, direct result of what has happened. Second, distribution. In my hand. There's an American Chinese comedian, I believe his name is Ronnie Chen, who does a great thing about American consumers. He says American consumers, they want to order it and they want it to be in their hand right away. And you know something? It's not just American consumers, it's Indian consumers too. It's African consumers, okay? I call it the Amazon effect, right? Now that we've seen it can be done, The question is to any company is, why can't you do it? Why do I have to wait a week? Okay. That implies, right, logistics, finely tuned logistics. We have some pretty killer software out there. So we're no longer talking about, doing miraculous stuff. I mean, one of the things that always fascinated me was the phenomenon of lunch delivery in India, where people would get their lunches, and I mean, they didn't have computers back then, but they still made it happen. Right? So this notion of getting it to the customer, I'm a marketing guy, as I've told you, this is very important. Particularly if you're selling something that's similar to somebody else, you need to get it to me faster than he can or she can. Okay. It's now, not tomorrow. Now. Okay. Combining safety and travel. It's going to be a huge business. Okay. It's already beginning to emerge. The airlines have now said that they're going to start doing testing. Some are already doing testing, but we all know that that's not enough, but at least it makes you feel a little bit safer on the plane. Okay. There's an entire industry out there, the travel industry, which is waiting for solutions that will help them marry travel and safety. Okay. One of the things that I didn't realize, I'd never really thought about it at the beginning of the pandemic, was when I heard one of the ministers in Brussels in Europe talking about it'll be great to get people back to work again and back to playing again. And the use of the word playing kind of stuck. I was like, playing? And then I realized, oh, she means the leisure industry in the biggest sense. And I did a little research on what we call the leisure industry. Good Lord Almighty, folks. We have a lot of free time. And we're going to have more. Going to work from home. Isn't work from home work from anywhere where you have a connection? Okay. Think about that. Okay. Combining travel and safety. That's an immediate one. Communities. Creating communities. Marketers have been doing this for years now. That's nothing new. Okay. But what is new is the absence of direct social contact that may extend itself for a little while yet. Okay. Zoom has replaced that. Okay. So to the extent that we can build some type of community, and when I say that, I'm thinking of all the American families who are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving on Zoom. First time ever. Think about that. I mean, Thanksgiving, I know perhaps I'm a little bit out of cultural context here, but Thanksgiving is the single largest holiday when American families get together. It's more important than Christmas. Zoom. Okay. And we all know Zoom was invented before any of this happened. Okay. This is like driving a horse-drawn buggy when I should be, using a Maserati. We'll get there. We'll get there. Zoom will get there, or somebody else will. Okay. And the food chain. Final one, where I think there's room for huge progress. Local food production. Okay. You can buy a container now, right? Freight farms. You can buy a container from a company in Boston that will allow you to raise the equivalent of 1 hectare of vegetables inside a container. Okay. Another thing that we've seen with the pandemic is, oh my goodness, we have to fly this from there and travel from there. What happens if they close the border? And suddenly we're looking local. We've been looking local for a while anyway, for health reasons, or at least perceived health reasons. But the pandemic has added another edge to that. And the thing is, we now have technology that will allow us to address that. Okay. I've hit my 40 minutes, and I've gone actually probably a couple minutes over. I'm famous for that. I guess now is probably a good time for me to perhaps shut up a little bit and try and address any questions or comments that you folks have very patiently listened to for the last few minutes here.
Thanks a lot, Bill. It was enjoyable, fun, informative as usual. It's bringing back stories and memories from, I think it was 14, 15 years ago now. So it has been some time.
Wow.
So I loved it, but I want to cut to the chase. I just have some comments
Sure.
and a question. Then I will turn into the questions of our friends here. So I loved how you labeled it as a post-industrialization era, and I think it should be looked at that way. Let's see how it is different from the current status. But one thing which your talk has reminded me of a conference I participated in a few weeks back, where I looked at entrepreneurship, and it's in the same lines as you've mentioned, where actually now small is good.
Yep.
It was bad a few years back.
Yep.
And now small is good,
Yep.
and big companies are struggling to be flexible enough, to be quick enough to respond, to scale down enough, and to be quicker to market, because you have a new reality every day.
That's right.
So small is coming back to fashion now, and I think the only way forward for big companies is try to act like small, or be small, which is interesting. It's something new that we haven't experienced, at least from my point of view as an entrepreneurship academic. One thing also which you've mentioned, and I would like to stress out, is can you? Yeah. One thing I would like to stress out, please, which is very important that you mentioned, is that every loser has a winner on the other side. So every loss is someone else's gain. So value does not disappear, whether in the stock market, or in the real estate market, or whatever. We have a controlled amount of value or money. I think we have a problem with other people joining in, but I think so. So that's where I think links your idea of opportunities. I think someone is winning. So whether it's digital media, whether it's playing at home, or telecommunication, or whatever. So it's not dark. It's just different. Yeah. It's different. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's an old expression. Well, I heard many years ago, or at least I was taught many years ago, which is, Bill, never forget that the $5 that you made today was somebody else's yesterday.
Exactly. And it will be someone else's tomorrow, right?
Absolutely. Exactly, my friend. Exactly.
And a personal request as well. I would love you to tell us a little bit. Could you turn off the mics, please? Can you please all? Yeah. So could you please? I've read your a very light, nice book of yours. It's called Massaging the Mind.
Yeah.
Guys, this is not a product placement. It is, but not paid for. It's not paid for. So it's just a small book that I've enjoyed, and I wish that you talk about it. I've learned also it was a class as well, but way beyond, after my time. So if you could tell us about it before I take questions.
Okay, sure. What happened was, I'll try and make a long story short, but I initially did my undergraduate work in political science and clinical psychology, because I couldn't figure out whether I wanted to be a psychologist or go to law school. Bottom line was, when I realized that to pursue my career in clinical psychology, I was going to be forced to do invasive research on live animals. I kind of lost my interest there and re-centralized myself. And it was, okay, how do you use psychology in business? Maybe marketing. Let me see if I can get into a marketing track. And I was successful in doing that. After a number of years, and I mean a long time, I realized I'd gotten pretty good at my job. At least I'd gotten promoted and whatever, so I assumed I was pretty good at my job. But I realized I was a little bit like a Formula One driver who was winning the races but didn't know how the engine worked. And so I wanted to dig a little bit into mechanics rather than driving. And so I jumped back into the rabbit hole of clinical psychology. And by this time, we now had PET scans and CAT scans and fMRIs, which meant we didn't necessarily have to cut people or animals open to be able to do the research that was required of you as an academic in the field. And so I jumped back down with a particular focus on marketing. Okay. And what I remember going to see Teresa Serra. You might remember Teresa. She was the head of the marketing department at IE. And I went and I said, Teresa, I got this idea for a new class. And she's like, great. What do you want to call it? I'm like, I'm going to call it Manipulation for Profit.
That's
and she looked at me and she's like, no, Bill, no. You're a marketing guy. Go home, see if you can come up with a better name. Okay, so I did. I came back, I guess a week later, I was like, how about massaging the mind? And she was like, that makes sense.
You just came from Thailand probably that time, right?
We launched it at the school, and it was very successful. It is then I'm now still teaching the class at the Rotterdam School of Management, and it's been taught in several other areas and companies as well.
I have to cut you short a little bit because we wanna catch up with the questions.
Sure, go ahead.
And I advise everyone to read it. It's a very nice, quick and short book. If you don't mind, let's have quick answers because we want to cover everyone's. It's Shiraz here is saying that it seems there's a trade-off between continents. I think that's more of a political question, but he's saying, do you see or foresee that there is changes of roles between Africa, Asia, and whatever? Do you have a comment on? Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. Okay, I'm going to be a little bit provocative here. Africa is the last continent to be developed. Okay, Europe is done, has been done. America done. The Americas done. Asia, for all intents and purposes, almost done. The only place that's left for kind of new significant infrastructure and new growth and new development is on the African continent. This has been a long time coming. And Africa is now stepping into its own. Actually, I was just this week offered the job of becoming a strategy director for a major African multinational, which I'm mulling through my head at the moment, simply because it's Africa's time. This is Africa's time. Yes.
Okay. Abdurrahman here is mentioning a good point. He's saying human memory is too short to remember COVID-19 ever existed. So do you think that everything will be just forgotten like every other?
I hear what he's saying about human memory being very, very short. But for somebody of my age, I mean, I'm in my late 60s, right? There's certain things that mark you, right? I remember exactly where I was when John Kennedy was shot. I remember exactly where I was when they crashed the planes into the World Trade Tower. And I will never forget exactly where I was when I heard of this thing called COVID and how it was going to mess up my life for a year. Okay. So I would tend to disagree a little bit. I don't think anybody's going to forget this anytime soon.
Okay.
I think we'll sublimate it, but I don't think we're going to forget it.
Okay. My teammate, Filippo Costa from Italy is bringing a good question. He's an investor, so he's asking something to build into his portfolio probably. He's saying, what do you think will happen to all that free space and retail space? Which shops do you think will stay around? I've read something interesting in the US lately that all these malls are turning into alternative usages. So they're turning into hospitals and other stuff. Yep. So do you want to comment on that, please?
Yep. I think that the space of many of the malls that have been closed, and let's talk about the malls first, is actually ideally located for either housing development or for other types of services. So I think that we will see a relatively I'd like to say, had it not been for COVID, I would say relatively rapid. I think COVID's going to slow that down, but we are already seeing a transformation of that excess retail space. Yes, we are. Now, that said, the United States has been over-retailed for a long time. This shakeout was inevitable. It had to occur, and we are seeing it. Does that mean retail is dead? No, it means retail needs to go back to its beginnings, where it started in France with a gentleman called Aristide Boussicot, who taught people back already then that it was about the experience, not about the product. They all forgot that.
What was the name of the show?
Au Bon Marché.
Oh, so it's still on, right?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yes.
Yeah, I know that.
Oh, he got it right. He got the model right.
He did. He has something right. Yeah.
He was copied by Selfridges. He was copied by Wanamaker in the U.S. He was copied by Meyer in Australia. He was at the heart of this whole retail movement, when he understood that it wasn't about the product, it was about the experience, and that is what most of these retailers have forgotten.
Exactly, and that's why Amazon is going back to it in some areas of their product line, right?
Absolutely.
Shubham Mittal is asking how much of artificial intelligence and machine learning is playing a role in marketing campaigns. I mean, we see a lot of hype now that, AI is taking over the world. Everything will be automated, and you know how very optimistic this is, But how much of that you think will creep into marketing and marketing campaigns specifically?
Okay, let me perhaps try the top end first. Having just completed a course in artificial intelligence with Andrew Ng, who's one of the leaders in the field. The most sophisticated artificial intelligent logarithms that we have at the moment basically can reason at the level of a 2-year-old. Okay, so it's a long way from taking over. However, what a lot of people might not want to hear is that a 2-year-old can do their job. And so as a result, anything that is highly repetitive, and we learned this from Alan Turing years ago. This is the whole Turing, whatever you can teach, whatever can be turned into a formula, right? Whatever can be turned into what we now call a logarithm can be taught to a computer. And once you teach it to a computer, the computer can do whatever it was supposed to do. Okay, so we've still got a long way to go. Alan Turing spotted this already way back during World War II. He spotted where all of this is going. We're at the beginning of a very long journey. Marketing people are still using some very crude techniques. People like Amazon and whatever, doing predictive modeling, for example, which is perhaps one of the most obvious proactive utilizations of the technology. Do I think that we will see more of the technology coming to bear? I sincerely hope so. Simply because it will help me serve my customers better, which is where I'm coming from. Okay, if I can get the ultimate product that you want to you in your hand quicker and better than anybody else, I win the game. And if AI is going to help me do that, then AI is my new BFF.
Bill, I mean, you have good experience in that area. I know it for sure. And I mean, do you think that? I think what he's trying to get to is that AI can get into some parts of marketing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he's meaning that or not. But I think the creativity side of marketing cannot be taught, right? I mean, you still have maybe the research, but the painting, the painting.
Yeah. Okay. Faisal, you're hitting me on something that I've been mulling over for a couple of years now. All right. When I got into marketing, a little bit of history. When I got into marketing, it was all about understanding your customer, having what the French would call the big idea, right? That would launch the campaign that they would identify with, and then we all march happily off to the land of profitability. Okay, that was the marketing world I signed into. Now, what I see is I find myself doing the equivalent of going through people's dirty laundry on a regular basis, right? Which is looking at their traffic. Right, using Google Analytics and all of the other analytics platform, and as I trace them and track them, and then use AI to anticipate by grouping together thousands of similar observations to anticipate where I think you're going to go. And in many cases, we get it right. Okay. Now, in terms of just throwing out AI, because I'm going to really disappoint some folks here, because when I said that most AI programs operate at the level of a 2-year-old, it has now been demonstrated that we now have, programs who can outperform human brokers. So I'm going to leave that right there.
Yeah.
I don't want to insult anybody any further. Right.
We have a lot of questions about consulting. I don't know if it's really a hot subject or we have a lot of consultants here, but a lot of people are asking about the impact of the pandemic into consulting. I mean, there's an obvious, of course, the freelance, the working from home thing. But do you have some thoughts there
Sure.
on the impact
Sure.
on consulting?
The impact on the consulting business is not new. The kind of slow, I won't call it a demise, but let's say decrease in the consulting market actually kicked in after 2008, right? When companies didn't have the money to pay the ridiculous amounts that they used to pay us before. And so that business basically disappeared. That was one. Okay. And so that reevaluation process as we went through it, now, at the same time that was happening, what was happening was the vulgarization of information. In other words, the world discovered Google, the world discovered McKinsey's website, the world discovered all of these websites who were doing content marketing. Who indeed, in other words, information that used to be scarce was now commonplace. And when the information is commonplace, you can't demand a premium for the price any longer. And this is the problem that has happened to a lot of consultants, which is that their area of expertise has been, as I like to call it, vulgarized. Okay. Yeah. I'm seeing that in the financial services business here in Geneva. Okay. So it's right across the board. In other words, if you're not delivering superior perceived value, God bless you.
Yeah, scarcity of knowledge now is becoming a challenge, not an opportunity. I think there's a very good question that I liked. All the questions are good, but this one I loved from Dr. Ubay. He says, from this is your area, so it's more consumer behavior. Okay. He said, do you think post-COVID, do you think people will spend more as a revenge? As to pay, to get back to what they have been doing, or actually adapt to their new reality and be very cautious about what they pay? I mean, would they be more conservative? I'm paraphrasing here, so
I got it.
Yeah, good.
That's a very difficult question to kind of answer in block, simply because I think that different segments, particularly income-related segments of the market, will respond differently. Okay. I think at the lower end of the market, people are going to be cautious for a while. They've taken a hit. Many might have been unemployed or furloughed, whatever the case may be, for an extended period of time, which means that their day-to-day realities will have changed significantly. Will they want to get back to something that they knew before? Probably, yes. The question is, will they be able to afford to do it? And will they be able to do so safely? Okay. Yeah. So that's one side. At the upper end of the market, my German professor loves so much, I think that there is going to be a little bit of revenge purchasing. Yes. I mean, if you take an example, what happened in China, I mean, literally the day after they opened up, right? The Hermes store, there were 2 Hermes stores. One of them did $3 million worth of sales in one day. Okay. The lines were around the corner. Okay. So it's very clear that not everybody, but some people, wanted that fix, if you will, or that rush of going to the store, dropping that 10,000, getting that bag, and having that huge dopamine rush that comes when you do all of that. And so yes, I think there will be some. I think this is one of the reasons why I was talking about travel and safety. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people who are dying to travel. Okay, particularly people, for example, here in Europe, for whom that month holiday is sacrosanct, and many had to stay home. oh boy, the minute they can get on a plane safely, oh yeah, they're going, if they can afford it, yeah, they're going to. And think also about the impact of work from home. Work from home means work from anywhere, right?
Means
So
saving as well, right? I mean,
yeah,
they've saved. A
absolutely.
lot of them have saved, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One last question, because we promised you to finish at 10. A very good question from Tariq, our colleague, Tariq Al-Angari, and also there was a similar question beforehand. What is the single sector you would bet on today, whether to invest or to start a business in? I hate these general questions. I know they're discomforting, they're not realistic, but what are you looking at today?
I have a problem answering that question because depending on what country you're talking about, the answer would be very different. Okay? For example, and again, I hope I don't freak anybody out here, but if you're talking about, a growth business opportunity in the United States, it's very clear that the marijuana business is a huge opportunity. The current incoming legislation has already indicated that they're in favor of legalization. We've seen the millions of dollars that have been paid in taxes already in Colorado and the states where it's already been legitimized. Other states, okay, so that's just one example. Okay, if you want to talk about, for example, certain countries in Africa, if you want to talk about Kenya, I think that the Kenyan Silicon Valley has some very interesting opportunities. There's some highly skilled programmers there who don't necessarily cost very much, who are state of the art. I would remind you that the world's mobile money, the first mobile money, came out of Kenya, not out of the United States, not out. Okay, that's M-Pesa. That's an African product. Okay, so, and it came out of Kenya. So again, it's a very difficult question to answer like that, because there are simply so many different opportunities in various parts of the world. So if you were to ask me that about a specific country or specific region in Africa, perhaps I could be a little more specific. But bottom line is, stock markets are at all-time highs, or very close to all-time highs. The markets are awash in money. And as I've always told the entrepreneurs I've worked with, there's a lot more money than there are good ideas. So there's always hope for us entrepreneurs.
That's true. Before we end, we promised you to finish at 10. I know it's late there. It's holiday season.
It's okay. You can run over.
You don't want to be with a bunch of Saudis at this time of the hour, but I really appreciate it. But before he logs out, I would like to salute and say hi to another professor of mine, which I have a lot of respect to, Professor Carmelo Mazza, who is with us. So I'd like to salute him before he logs off. He is a person important to me personally. And at the end of this, Bill, you have always been, fun, insightful, and informative, and I really loved it. I've told my board, I mean the club's board, that this is for me more than for everyone else. So thank you for your time. Thank you for arranging to be with us at this difficult and very personal time of yours. Thank you for being with us. Really enjoyed it. It was very insightful. I will send you the other 40 to 50 questions by email.
Actually, if anybody wants to reach out, you can find me on Google, just Bill Carney. Otherwise, it's bill@billcarney.org. So if you have any questions that we haven't been able to address and you'd like some feedback, feel free.
We charge for that.
You charge for that?
Yeah,
okay.
at the club.
I was going to say it's included, but okay, I'll let the club handle that.
I'm just kidding. I mean, before we say thank you, I would like also to thank my colleague Mariam.